We all think about victims' parents in a case like Jeffrey's, but we don't often think about the parents whose child committed crimes like this. What's it been like for you?
Well, it's been horrendous. I don't know if I have words to explain something that was never seen or forecast or expected. I learned about Jeff in the same way everyone else did. A friend called me and told me it had been on television in another state. And so half an hour later I turned the television on and saw his picture. And at that point, what do? You can't believe what's happening. And you cry and you grab a friend, and that's what I did. What was most unusual about it was that I didn't know, I hadn't been in contact with Jeff, although I tried, and yet no one had ever let me know that Jeff had been in any kind of trouble at all during the years.
When did the full impact of all of this hit you?
I don't know if it has yet. I don't know if it ever will. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever be able to. How does anyone, the full impact, it's the rest of our lives. I have another son, a younger son, for the rest of his life. He will have to find a way to be strong and deal with this.
Has this followed him?
Yes, it has. But he's doing very well. He's finished an graduate degree and is working and very successful and visits his brother. It's a very difficult thing to say. Stone, one of the hardest things for me to say is how much I can't believe this happened and how much I love Jeff, when I'm very much aware that it's almost like I don't have a right to mourn or grieve, because there are all these families who will never, ever speak to their children again. It's a very strange set of circumstances. I still have my son Jeff now to talk to, and we've established a wonderful relationship, and I hope I don't hurt all of the people who've lost their children by saying that.
What was he like as a young boy before school?
Wonderful. I thought he was wonderful. He was fun. We did all of the normal things that people do. It's hard to be asked questions that go back 30-some years when you never expected that anything but good would happen in your family.
Were there ever any early signs of trouble with Jeff?
If there had,
looking back on it today, were there?
no. What would you look for? If I'd seen something that had been a clue of any kind, I'd like to think that I would have done something about it immediately. No, there wasn't anything unusual about Jeff. He was a normal young boy.
Jeff's first grade teacher referred to him as inordinately shy and profoundly unhappy.
he didn't seem inordinately shy to me. He seemed, he didn't like school. He had a very difficult year that year, first grade, moving from where he lived. I was pregnant with his baby brother, so...
Did he seem profoundly unhappy?
No. Well, he... no. When you say profoundly unhappy, there wasn't any clue that there was anything other than this was a little, rather shy child who had to go to school and mingle and be sociable, and that wasn't his thing.
What kinds of things was Jeff exposed to? What kinds of things did he see and hear?
Nothing out of the ordinary. Well, what can I do? I can compare it with my own upbringing, and my mother and father fought, and it was kind of a normal thing, and they would get over it, and Lionel and I discovered very early on that we were very different people. I was more emotional and more outgoing than he was, and marriage became really a very unhappy place. And how much that affected the children at the time, I didn't think that it affected them in any really harmful way, because they were never physically abused.
There were very heated arguments. And on occasion that would lead to some physical...
Excuse me, Stone. If you want to stop a minute and think about whether you want to talk about that abuse on the...
How am I going to know what's going to be on television and what's not going to be?
Well, I mean, I think you need to assume, while only a very small portion of this will be on, I mean, I want you to be comfortable with what you say, because...
Well, one of the things that I don't want to get involved in on this television show is trying to do the same thing to Lionel as he's done to me, and that is to somehow blame him. So
I'm not asking. I really don't want to get to
whose
fault. No, we're rolling. But I'm just saying, I don't want to get. I'm really not concerned with fault and whether it was you or whether it was Lionel. What I'm trying to understand is what was going on between you, for whatever reason. I'm sure both of you brought something to the table on that. That's usually the case in a marriage situation. My question is, what kinds of things, what do you recall about the kinds of things that were happening between you that Jeff may have been exposed to, and to the extent that there is some question about the kind of emotional turmoil that might have caused him?
Stone, I have to tell you, I've thought of that over and over again, and there's nothing about the kind of arguments, the kinds of fights we might have had, the disagreements over how to bring up children, there was nothing unusual about that. And Jeff is not the result of what is going on in every home in America. He's not the result of that.
So you're saying it wasn't a perfect marriage, you're saying, but it was nothing so extraordinary that it could explain why he went on to do what he did?
Absolutely not. Telling you the truth the very best I can, there wasn't anything unusual.
What do you remember about the pregnancy?
I had what I thought were probably the ordinary kinds of things that happen when you're pregnant, and
morning sickness.
Morning sickness.
A lot of nausea.
Yes.
Lionel describes a strange, undiagnosed problem. He describes it as some kind of a seizure that you developed, a proneness to seizures late in the pregnancy, where he describes it as a kind of rigidness for which you were prescribed medications. Do you remember that, and can you describe it?
I don't remember that at all. I can't imagine where that comes from. it isn't true. I don't.
You don't recall anything like that?
No.
Seizures or
No.
seizure-like episodes?
Absolutely not.
Were you prescribed medications, including morphine, barbiturates?
I don't know what medications were prescribed, and I'm surprised that anyone says that there is something that lists every single medication I took 33 years ago. I had a doctor, a physician. I took the medicine that was prescribed for me, and for the most part I was healthy.
You weren't on morphine?
I don't think you give pregnant women morphine. I'd have to ask my doctor, but they don't give pregnant women morphine.
Barbiturates of any kind in order to calm you down in these seizure states, as Lionel describes them?
There were no seizure states.
Where's
I
that
don't know where
coming
that's
from?
coming from. Well, Stone, I don't know. And it's one of the reasons why I'm finally speaking out, because there were no seizures. There was nothing that was out of the ordinary as far as my pregnancy was concerned, except that I needed to be in bed.
There's an obvious discrepancy here between what you're saying and what Lionel is saying about the nature of the pregnancy. It was difficult, you both agree, but he describes you in these states where you were, as he says, literally frothing at the mouth.
Are you serious?
In these rigid states, yeah, for which you were given medication to settle or calm you down.
Well, I don't know what his purpose is in doing that. I do know that when this first happened, the very first thing that the husband that I divorced did was come out with these accusations against me. They're not true. Well, I don't know how I can prove it to you that they're not true.
Is it possible you just don't remember them?
No, it's not possible. I don't remember them. It was my first pregnancy. I remember everything about my first pregnancy.
There's an important point you want to talk about that you really want to make, and is the reason why you've come on. So let's talk about that.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much, Stone, because I'm really feeling like the questions that I've been asked so far are exactly the reason why I wanted to come on, exactly the reason why I want to write a book tentatively titled An Assault on Motherhood, and that's exactly how I feel, like I'm being assaulted by statements that can't be substantiated, that people have said are not so, but here I am one more time having to defend myself. I want to get across that we as women just can't take this kind of thing anymore. If something bad happens to our son or our child, there has to be a place for us to go. I want a place for all the victims to have a place where there's some compassion and understanding instead of a blaming.
Do you feel that you're being blamed?
Yes, I do.
Do you feel that Lionel's blaming you?
That certainly does seem to be what happened when he first came out on television.
And there are elements of Lionel's new book which do seem to say things about the pregnancy, about reluctance to breastfeed after the pregnancy, about Joyce's state during early motherhood, which seem to indicate something was wrong with the mothering. Now, this isn't the theme of the book, but it corresponds to the theme of so many questions from the media that have come along all along the way. And I'm not saying you're asking these now.
But at the same time, Lionel asks a lot of questions about himself, about what kind of father he was, about his own thoughts and maybe his own mistakes. I mean, one of the first places he looks is right in the mirror.
But if he wants to speak about himself, it's fine if he wants to make false or accurate accusations about his own behavior. But to state things about Joyce, which may or may not be true, and in some cases apparently are not true, in his book, is a certain type of blaming, somebody who has not yet had the opportunity to speak up.
You've read his book.
Yes.
Joyce, you have not read it.
No, I haven't.
Joyce has not read it yet. Joyce has been not well, and reading that book, which just came out, hasn't been something she was ready for.
The excerpts that I have seen in the newspaper are so astounding to me. He told everyone that I was crazy, that I had abused my body with medicines, that I somehow was to blame. There's no doubt about that. Now he turns around and, for whatever his reasons are, I don't know what he's trying to accomplish with talking about something he should have shared with me before he ever married me, if he's got some thought that that had anything to do with Jeff.
You mean his mental state, that you weren't informed?
Dreaming
Right.
of murder,
Yes,
the
exactly.
obsession with explosives. He never talked to you about any of that.
None of that.
I think one of the points is it's all clear in retrospect. I mean, for instance, one of the anecdotes that he tells in the book, Joyce, is when Jeff was 4 years old and Lionel had crawled underneath the house to remove some dead animals, and he put some of the bones from the dead animals into a bucket. And Jeff, at age 4, probably innocently, went over and was playing with the bones and seemed fascinated
That
with
absolutely
these bones.
astounds me. Excuse me for interrupting you, but I never heard anything like that ever happened.
You see, you're doing a television
You don't.
show prompted by a book which was written, which apparently is one parent's story which doesn't jive with the other parent's story at all.
Which is why we're here.
Right.
Which
And
is
this is
exactly
why
why we're here.
now we're
that kind of an
talking like
anecdote.
this.
Now, do you
That,
now
as
let me-
far as I know, that never happened. That sounds like the shows that people go on and talk about children mistreating animals, and can you predict who's going to do something terrible somewhere down the line in his life. Jeff's condition was proven to not have anything to do with his upbringing. I don't want parents frightened to death thinking that the little things they do or the little things they miss are going to result in them having a child that is going to cause all of this pain and anguish. That isn't the way it happened. In my mind, you cannot tell how certain actions or reactions are going to be computed in a child's mind. So the first thing I thought about was he emotionally, did he come out of this life with us emotionally disturbed in some way? He didn't. I've asked him.
Some people would say that someone who had committed such horrible crimes must have had something horrible happen to them. You're saying just didn't happen.
You know, I wish I had an answer. It's a terrible feeling to have this unending, unknown, why did this happen? What's the purpose of this happening? The horribleness that so many people have had to go through. I wish I could come up with an answer. That would be useful. It isn't useful to speculate on what small, tiny little things did we spank our child, and that turned him into a, as they called me, a monster maker. Jeff was raised with all the love and care and concern that any child could be raised with, and what happened to him? I don't know. I wish I knew. I'd give anything to know.
When you ask yourself that question, Joyce, I mean, you know, when you're alone with yourself and you wonder why it happened, what answers do you come up with? What questions do you have about the origins of his madness, if you will?
I can't explain it. I can only cry about it. I ask the universe, why would this be allowed to happen? I don't have an answer for that.